209 Prep Sports Media. Today we're back with, it's just going to be Scott and I today. We've got a guest in the studio, happens to be the one and the only, my beautiful daughter, Gabby Herrera. Scott will ask her some questions a little bit later regarding recruiting and things like that. Today we're going to cover just a little bit about what's going on in the environment as far as, you know, how COVID's affecting California and the area. And then we'll get into some recruiting stuff and then also talk about how things are going on across the state. So let's just start off with the newest news, I guess, is the Pac-12 and California coming to some type of an agreement yesterday, you know, to kind of get football back and going this fall, which is a complete pivot from what we kind of expected, right? I mean...
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see that they have kind of fallen in line with the other Power 5 conferences that came out of the gate from day one, because you had the ACC, you had the ACC and the
SEC.
Yeah, sorry, I said that twice. The SEC, but You just recently, before the Pac-12, you had the Big Ten come out and say that they're going to play their first games on October 24th. And I find that interesting because if you looked at some of the rhetoric that was involved when they were making these decisions early on, it was almost everybody was holding back to see who was going to go first. And when you're talking about a conference like the SEC, I don't think there was any question that they were going to play. I think everybody agrees that the teams that are involved in that conference and the the money that generates, they were going to play. But now you have the Big Ten, which, is the Ohio States, the Penn States, the Minnesotas. They're moving forward. So I think that really put the Pac-12 behind the 8 ball football-wise. And so they had to make a decision. Are we really going to lose our status as a Power 5? If we don't play this year, I think that's what would have possibly happened. I don't know. I'm not savvy enough to understand that part of it, but I think it would have really hurt them.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine it's got to be a factor. I mean, no matter what we talk about or what we say or what we think or how political we want to get about this, it's got to be somewhat about money and somewhat about recruiting, which is also about money. If you, at any given time, you can look on ESPN and you go to their high school type of sports and you go to recruiting and you can find out who's recruiting who, who's got the top recruits, the top 300 recruits or whatever. And if you start seeing... Well, the Pac is already probably down relative to the SEC and the Big Ten or the Big 12, and so you start getting into this situation where they almost feel like they're obligated, because if they, no matter what their thought process is, and they don't want to, whether they want to do it or don't want to do it, if they don't do it, now you're in trouble. You're behind the 8 ball so bad, and now you're digging. Now you've dug this hole that's not a 6-month fix or a 1-year fix. You're probably talking years, maybe a decade before you get some relevancy back.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ancillary effects that go on with this as well. Just like you said, the recruiting. I mean, can you imagine being a top recruit? You've done the process, you've gone through it, and we'll probably get some perspective here in a few minutes on that. But you go through the process and you've made the decision that, maybe I'm a top quarterback and I've made the decision to play in the Pac-12, regardless of what school. I've made the decision to play in the Pac-12. And then I look and the Pac-12 has basically said, we're going to pump the brakes. We're not going to play this year. But maybe I was on a recruitment list for some of these other schools, maybe in the SEC, the ACC, whatever. Now you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, did I make a terrible decision? And beyond that, it's going to be interesting to see how these schools play into the national, at the end of the year, the national when playoffs and how those things roll out. Are they going to, shorten their season so much that by the end of their season, they're on the same schedule as the rest of these schools? So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
I think that's actually the plan. I mean, I read as far as the Big 12, their plan is to get enough games in to qualify for the playoff, and so I'm assuming, and again, this is a big assumption because, we're still hand-tied a lot with as far as what the COVID restrictions are. How is UCLA, USC, Cal, Stanford, those types of schools going to practice when you can't have more than 10 people around each other and you got to be a 6-foot distance and you can't use shared equipment? How does that happen?
Yeah. And you make a great point. And we talked about this the other day offline. You know, we look at the conference, like, for example, the Sun Belt. I had a blast watching those Sun Belt teams last weekend, because we're getting the opportunity now. The TV market isn't as saturated with the top Division I games. So we're getting to see, you know, a Louisiana or, you know, a University of Texas, San Antonio, or, you know,
App State.
Yeah. Marshall.
Eastern Kentucky, Marshall. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're getting to see all these other schools play. But one of the things, and again, this is by no means have anything to do with politics, but when you look at the sideline and you're watching the coaches, every single coach there has to have a mask on. He's got to be wearing a mask. The officials have to be wearing masks. None of the players are wearing masks. So how is that effective? And you know, I have personal opinions on the subject, which I'll keep to myself, but it does beg the question, how is this really being monitored when not everybody's being treated the same way in terms of what they have to do to protect themselves or protect other people?
Yeah, for sure. It's an oddity. I mean, we have this situation you're seeing it, the bubbled sports, basketball, and I mean, some people have chose to not be involved or not watch, and viewership's down and all those types of things. But shoot, basketball, they're bubbled. I mean, they can't even leave. If they leave, they get kicked out. Yet they're still having to the coaches still have to wear masks. They're tested daily, or at least bi or tri-weekly. So I don't get it. I don't understand. To me, it doesn't compute. Maybe I'm not smart enough. I don't know.
Well, I think at some point it becomes an optics conversation. You know, the public opinion is very carries a lot of weight in this country, and so when they're looking at a newscast or something along those lines, and you constantly hear people picking other folks out about, hey, they're not wearing a mask, they're not wearing a mask. I think by doing that, at least they're trying to eliminate that part of the conversation. So that's not, you know, it kind of rolls the focus back on the sport, not so much on the fact that they are in a bubble and there is this virus going on. They're trying to sell the game of basketball or, you know, baseball or whatever it is. So that might have something to do with it.
And you're probably 100% right on that, because it doesn't, I mean, medically it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But let's not get too political about that. So getting back to California and the state of sports in California, if we are able to get back, say, January, like the initial plan is, you know, and the sports that are being, so obviously there's some type of discussion being had, and there's some type of, you know, we're laying off a little bit enough to allow these Pac-12 or these schools to start playing football. So football may not be the problem, you know, but what about volleyball? You know, what about these indoor sports?
That's right.
You know, and how is that going to affect, you know, is that going to be an issue? I mean, I you know, again, I'm just playing, you know, we want to be inclusive of all the sports, you know. To me, where we're at in this whole thing, why aren't we doing cross country? Why aren't we doing tennis? Why are we not doing golf? The weather's fine. You know what? We could have knocked out golf, track, you know, these individual sports where you're not sharing equipment and you're not being overly exposed. And I guess that would beg the question: is it going to require us to be in school, the kids to be in school before they're going to allow competition? Right.
And if you're listening to this and you have some perspective on that and you have some knowledge that maybe we're not addressing, we'd love to hear from you on that. It just, you know, the more we know about what's going on, I think maybe not, in a sense, it's not comforting, but at least we have a better sense of the direction that we're going. But again, you know, we'll say this a couple times throughout the broadcast, but we want to hear from you. We've got and Chris will say our contact information again right now.
Yeah, it's 209 Prep Sports on Twitter and Facebook. Again, 209 Prep Sports on Twitter and Facebook. I always stumble with that, but you know, and so kind of getting to the next topic, I guess, for us is, you know, not just where the sports are going to lie with us, and, you know, how this is going to be, how we're going to get back to doing things, you know, in a normal quote unquote environment. You know, now we look across the states that are and are not playing football. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I haven't heard that these schools are playing volleyball. I mean, football right now is dominating the landscape. So I don't know if, I mean,
I've seen a couple of colleges have some indoor volleyball matches. I haven't paid too close of attention to it because I think it's gone on such a small scale. But there's been a couple that have occurred, and it might be worth some research to see where that's going. But yeah, I agree with what you said about the outdoor sports. Why are we not moving forward with them? There's a lot that I think the effect of what's going on is very broad. There's going to be a lot of issues once we start getting back online. Once you get to the college level, how the players are going to be affected with their eligibility, which, by the way, the NCAA just came out and made it official that they're giving the option to fall sports to the colleges for their fall sports athletes to grant them an additional year of eligibility. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects football players, volleyball players, ice hockey players, any of the fall sports, cross country at the NCAA level, how the schools are going to handle that. Because I know some of the schools, they were able to grant them an additional year of eligibility for the spring sports of 2020. And some of the schools have opted not to do that. And it's unfortunate because you had some senior athletes that lost their senior season and they're not going to get it back, and they're going to graduate, which is great, or, move on. But it's, that can be pretty devastating to an athlete that has put so much time in. And, oh, by the way, you don't get to play your senior year. And as a university, we have the option of giving you an additional year, but we're not going to. So that's unfortunate when that happens. So,
well, I'm hearing a lot of things across the country, just as far as the universities and where their finances are how this is affecting them financially. I was talking to a friend of mine, a friend of theirs, daughter applied to a prestigious school in the Carolinas. I won't get too deep into this, but she applied to this school. She, on a regular year, she would have had like a 23% chance of getting into the school. So, not that she couldn't, but not, it definitely wasn't going to happen. The school told her if she paid $10,000, they would lock a spot up for her right now. So she basically front pays her tuition for 2021, and that ensures her a spot at this prestigious university.
Interesting.
So I don't know that that's going on a broad landscape, and again, I'm not trying to put anybody on blast or get anybody in trouble, but I think that we're going to see things that we've just never, it's a new world. It's a new landscape. It's a new world. It's the rules that we knew are out the door, are out the window. We're now in I think it's the new frontier, and how we're going to navigate this frontier as far as, the medical piece of it, the financial piece of it, how much of this becomes online learning? I mean, how much of an education process are we? Because here's the reality: the majority of the kids are struggling with online learning at the elementary and high school level.
Sure,
but some are thriving, and that's those kids that they're wired. Everybody, all of us are wired different.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, obviously, there's a lot of evidence out there that there's many different learning styles. You go to any single classroom and you're looking 7, 8, 10 different learning styles in the same classroom. And so, the online learning definitely is not for everyone. I think me personally, if I had to do it, I would probably be one that struggles. But it's going to, one of the things that what you were talking about in terms of admissions at the college level, one of the things that's occurred here in California, and I think a lot of other states are now adopting this for the upcoming school year, not the one we're in, but I think the 2021 fall classes, they are eliminating SAT and ACT. And you can't help but to think, athletics aside, that's going to really level the playing field in terms of admissions. And I would almost think that might make things more difficult in terms of getting in, because you're a student, you've thrived, you've done amazingly well in the classroom, and then you just go knock it out of the park on one of these standardized tests, and it puts you at the front of the line. And oh, by the way, the school you're applying to doesn't care because it's not a factor. So now you're going to be, it'll be interesting to see what other things are going to be considered and getting the students in. And being an athlete is advantageous to be able to go to a school that wants you there. I think that that kind of trumps that whole situation. But for the students that aren't athletes, I think it, for some of them, it's going to make life a little bit more difficult.
For sure. And when we, both of us attended, very good universities, and the college experience isn't just about going to class. The college experience wasn't just about playing football or baseball. The college experience is the college experience. It's all of it. It's, you meet some of your best friends in the world. You're for the first time in your life, you're out of your parents' home, and you don't have somebody kind of hovering over you to make sure you're doing the right thing.
Right.
And so, and all of us, that first month or so is touch and go. We get, a little bit homesick, and, for those that don't know how to cook or clean or those types of things, that, they're making constant runs home if they're able to, or, so it's just, and I feel like, so, coaching at the high school level, I'm seeing it, I'm seeing a disassociation with kids that, I typically had a great relationship with, that, I haven't seen now in 8 months or 7 months or whatever. I reach out to them, text them, and many times don't even reply. So, the one thing I will say about where we're going with this. So the states that have chose to start playing, it's not hard and fast. It's not like, hey, we're playing and we're going to go no matter what. Mm-hmm. Every single time. You can Google it. You can go and you can Google any state that's playing football to a state. There's at least one, if not more, high schools that have canceled games in the last week because of one case of COVID, because of 2 cases of COVID, because a case of COVID in the district that didn't even apply to the team. So, it's going to be a fluid situation once California pulls the trigger and we're allowed to start playing. I anticipate either a shortened season or a season where we're going to see multiple cancellations or postponements. Shoot, we may see a Wednesday night football game, right? At some point, because it's necessary. Yeah,
and it's necessary from the standpoint, and the one thing, and maybe we can kind of finish up this conversation with this, but when everything does hit at the same time, we have to remember that there's only a limited amount of officials out there. And so you will see games played on non-traditional days to afford that, because I know firsthand that there are officials that officiate multiple sports throughout the season, and because of the way that the games are scheduled, they're able to do that. Now, if they schedule a football game on a Tuesday night and that's a traditional volleyball night, the cupboard may run a little bare when it comes to officiating, but we'll see how that works out. Hopefully they have a plan, and we're just going to remain optimistic on it and hope that moving forward, things work out. Again, we said this last time, this is the hand we were dealt. We just got to go with it. I think as high school athletes, and when we talk to Gabby here in a few minutes, I'm sure she can kind of elaborate on this a little bit. You have to be prepared. You don't know when that's going to happen, when the season's going to happen. But if you aspire to be a college athlete, you better be ready, and you better be prepared for whatever sport you are competing in high school, because they're not going to wait for you.
Exactly. So. And talk to your point, about preparedness. We may be in a situation where you typically see 2 umpires in a softball or a baseball game where it's 1. Yeah. We may end up getting to a situation where there may not be a lot of JV competitions and we already had an official issue. We already had a lack of enough referees or officials, because here's the reality. You get paid X amount of dollars, which isn't substantial. You're doing it because of the joy of the game, and you're getting your butt chewed half of it because you make a bad call. That's right. They're humans too. I mean, and I'm a coach, and I've felt like I've been slighted many times, and then when cooler heads prevail and you get your 48-hour cooling off period by Monday, I'm like, God, I was kind of out of line. Why would the guy, I don't know the guy. The guy doesn't know me. Why would he have a vendetta against us? Right. But we take it personal at the time. So with all of that, getting us started, and now I guess it's a great time for us to pivot into recruiting, I think I want everybody to be aware that this is not going to be a Linden type show. It's just, it happens to be convenient at this point. We're in a COVID situation where we don't have access to a lot of kids and athletes. We're getting this whole thing started from the ground up. We're doing it, with a grassroots effort, very organic. We don't have a lot of money behind it. And so we're going to utilize the people that we have at within our network, at least for us to get started. And once we start to grow, then we'll expand beyond this. But when we start to talk about recruiting, I think it's important for kids to understand how it works. And I think we should talk about, how the sports how when you play a sport outside of high school, the competitiveness of that sport and how that type of recruiting works. And so I'm gonna kind of step aside on this whole thing and let Scott carry this, so there's not as much nepotism with Gabby being my daughter. But before I do that, again, we're at 209 Prep Sports on Twitter and 209 Prep Sports on Facebook. We also have an email that you can shoot us an email if you'd like a topic covered, or you think there's an athlete, if one of you athletes are out there listening and you'd like to have a conversation with us about where you're at in your recruiting process, or even if you're not being recruited, and how the high school experiences work for you, how you're dealing with COVID, all those type of things. So our email address is prepsports209@yahoo.com. Again, prepsports209@yahoo.com. With that being said, I'll hand it over to Scott.
Yeah, so in the studio with us today is Gabby Herrera, and Gabby is a star softball player. I've known her since she was a little kid, had the opportunity to get to see her play with my daughters off and on throughout the years, and there was always something special about the way she played the game. So we're really fortunate to have her here today. I won't try to say what you've been through or what your accomplishments are, because I'll probably miss some of them. But Gabby, if you could just take a few minutes and kind of give us your prep background and what you've done up to this point.
Okay, so I started playing when I was probably around 4, and we always played at the Diamond in Linden, and it was really small, basically just playing against all the girls you kind of grew up with, and there wasn't very much competition. So as I started to get older, we decided to put me in a better team. So I started playing for the Rebels out of Stockton when I was 10. I played 12U for a year or two, and then 14s, and then 16s, and then 18s, and then I switched teams a couple times, and I ended up with the team I would say really gave me the best opportunity to be where I am today. I played for the Sorcerers out of Pleasant Hill, and we have girls come from all over. So there's girls from Sacramento, from Stockton, from the Bay Area, from Fresno. And they really just gave you the opportunity to be able to showcase your best self with the tournaments we go to and the girls you're playing with and against. And the competition really just is unreal, to say the least. You're playing against girls that are going Power 5 schools everywhere. You're going to UCLA, UW, Oregon State, Utah, everywhere you can think of, there's girls going there. So, I mean, playing against those girls every weekend kind of just elevates your game. So
yeah, for sure. And one of the things I want to point out too, in your youth background and your pedigree, if you will, growing up, you grew up in a softball, baseball minded family. Your father played college baseball. Your grandfather was a softball icon in the area. I think he coached my daughters and it was so much fun to watch him coach. Before we get too much further on that, how do you think, your father and your grandfather, how was their influence on your softball career and really kind of got you to the point that you're at today?
So being my dad, he enrolled me in softball because he had played baseball his whole life, and I think we kind of just wanted to try it. So my mom actually coached me when I was younger, and then my grandpa took on the role of helping her. But just being around them made me want to get better because I always wanted to make them proud, and just seeing that they were proud of me made me want to do better and better and work harder. And my grandpa had always given me pitching lessons when I was younger, and it was just a time that I got to spend with him that I think I really took for granted at the time, because I didn't really want to do it, but seeing him being there with me and making him happy and seeing him watch me progress kind of made me happy to see that. And so I think I just kept doing it for that long. But they really influenced me to just keep playing. And times when I want to quit, I just think of how our whole family has just gone through the whole softball, baseball thing our entire life, and just seeing how it still connects me to them, and being able to talk about softball or baseball with my dad, it kind of gives us a special bond. And so
That's great. It's always good to hear how, as athletes, you have a love for the game, but also how that game kind of transcends into the family. And I think we could probably go across the board and look at a lot of the other local athletes that have gone on, and the support of their family has been tremendous. And I'm sure, as we talk to some of the other athletes, we'll find that out. But one of the questions I have for you is, throughout your prep career, when was there a certain time that you really kind of decided, hey, this is what I want to do in college, and I'm going to step up my game? And what did you do when you made that decision?
So I always knew I wanted to play in college. In your head, you always think, oh, I want to go big school. Like, this is my dream school. But you don't really realize how much work it takes. So I hadn't been recruited at all. And a lot of my friends, they hadn't really been recruited either, but I had seen girls like commit in 7th grade, 8th grade. So I think freshman year was kind of really when I stepped it up and started to actually put in more work and put in the effort. And that's not even just on the field. That's doing mental work. That's lifting. That's doing fundamental drills, like wall drills with the ball. And I think I started to really take it serious my freshman year. And I really knew I wanted to go to a big school. And when I didn't get offers from big schools at first, it kind of made me want to work harder. And so after that, I really stepped it up and started every day doing all my hitting, my lifting, my playing catch, my ground balls, my fly balls every day. And I think that's kind of where the turning point was for me.
That's great. That's great to hear, because I think it's too often that we'll hear of athletes that maybe things aren't going their way and they'll do maybe just the opposite. They were dealt a bad hand, or the coach doesn't like me, or, you hear all these stories, and it's always nice to hear the story of the athlete that maybe things didn't go your way for a while and you decided the best way to correct that is hard work. Dan Gable, the head wrestling coach at University of Iowa, won 17 NCAA championships. And his quote was always, "There's nothing that hard work can't fix." And I think that applies to what you're saying right here, is that you took a situation and you decided to just work harder. So I think that's fantastic. When you did start getting recruited, maybe kind of walk us through that a little bit. Did you almost start feeling a little bit more pressure on the field and the kind of the way that you were playing? What were your feelings when you actually started seeing some of those responses from these schools that were looking at you?
Yeah, definitely. I took my first visit in January of 2019, and then from there to July, it was really quiet. I didn't really have anybody emailing me or looking at me. I would send emails every week to probably about 50 schools. You never get a response. Well, I never got a response personally. But in July, I played in the All-Star game at the Independence Day tournament in Boulder. And
that's one of the biggest softball tournaments around, right?
Yeah, it's a week-long tournament. But the All-Star game, it's just uncommitted players. So I played in that, and I had one of the best games of my life, awesome. I would think. But after that, I started to get interest throughout the week, and they came to watch our games. I was one of my team's best performers for that week. And then the tournament led to a couple of official visits and emails and interest from a lot of other schools. And I appreciated the love and interest from all these schools, but for me personally, they weren't where I saw myself spending my last 4 years playing the game I love. So I decided from there to just keep working and just kind of let things pan out, because everything happens for a reason, in my opinion. So there was reasons why I wasn't getting recruited. And a lot of schools don't have money for older people who are farther along in high school at this point. So I was already going into my senior year, and so I kind of just wanted to wait for everything to pan out. And I decided at the end of 2019, if I hadn't had the offer that I wanted, I would commit to the first school that offered me, which out of all the ones I had been to, that was still my favorite. It just wasn't exactly what I wanted. So I attended a camp in August, and then I began talking to the coaches, and I committed October 1st of 2019, and I signed my national letter of intent November 13th. That's
awesome. That's a great story, and you definitely landed in a softball wise. Well, to be quite honest, I think Oregon's good at everything, but I think softball wise, you landed at a really good place. One of the things too that we will often hear athletes who have committed is, they'll say things like, I really like the facility. Obviously, Oregon's got top-notch facilities.
Yeah.
I really like the school. I think it goes without saying Oregon's a great university. Maybe talk to us a little bit about your feeling with the coaching staff there, because I know that's a major decision factor for most kids when they're making this decision. So obviously you have a good relationship with the coach, but maybe kind of elaborate a little bit on, your feelings on the coaching staff and why you like them.
Yeah, definitely. So recruiting is really all about being wanted and being shown love and being appreciated as you go to the schools. And so as you go to these schools, if you get shown love and you're appreciated and they reach out to you, you kind of want to gravitate that way. And so Coach Melissa Lombardi, she coached at Oklahoma before. Now she's at Oregon. She's unreal. She's the best coach, the best person. She reaches out all the time. When I had my surgery, she was there. She called me. She would text me. She would send me all this stuff and just was really there for me. Kind of like a mom figure in a way. Like, she was just very caring towards me. I have nothing bad ever to say about her. She's incredible. Coach Schultz, he's the hitting coach. He reaches out all the time too. He's great. Coach Lang, Coach Coons, everybody there really just shows you appreciation and love, like they want you to be there. Even our equipment manager, Kenzie, Jackie Klein, our director of operations, our trainer, they all just really show you love and they act like they want you to be there, which is kind of a big part of being recruited and wanting to actually attend that school.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, being wanted, that's a great point. And I'm glad you talked about that, because I think that's something that a lot of other athletes that are considering college, they need to hear. You want to go to a place that you're wanted, and that's a very strong statement. So here we are. You've made the decision to go to University of Oregon to play softball. I know that you leave on Sunday to go to school. Maybe kind of tell us and the listeners what's next. What's next for you as you move forward?
Yeah, definitely. So the Pac-12 actually just came out and said football's playing, so that kind of opens doors for us to be able to have a somewhat normal season this spring. Our fall, actually, they just confirmed that we'll play 8 scrimmages. I think they're going to be inter-squads, so we'll play against each other, but there are no time limits. They don't affect our practice times for the week, our 4-hour, 8-hour week practices. So it kind of will hopefully bring some normalcy to what's been a crazy last year.
Yeah, for sure. The Pac-12 opening up is a big deal. It's going to affect all the sports in the Pac-12. Let's hope that moving forward that we start to settle down on this pandemic and get back to normalcy, and you guys are able to play a meaningful full season. That's the goal for everyone. But let's hope that happens. But Gabby, thank you so much for being here and giving us some insight on what your pathway was. We're hoping that there's some other athletes out there in their respective sports that really listen to what you had to say, and it really helps them out. But speaking of which, if you have any questions or that you're going to be committing somewhere, we want to hear from you. Please, here's our contact information again.
It's going to be prepsports209@yahoo.com. Again, prepsports209@yahoo.com. You can also get us at 209 Prep Sports on Twitter and Facebook. I do want to talk a little bit about Gab and about the things that she went through. She's very humble and she's not going to toot her own horn, which I would totally expect. But the process for softball, and I think this is going to be great going forward for everybody to understand how it kind of works. So she played on a local team, travel team. She played in Linden for a while and then went to a local travel team, which was comprised of kids from around the area. Not that it wasn't a good team or a bad team. They just never stepped up their level of competition. So at some point she knew that she wanted to play at a D1 level. So it became important. And something that a lot of people don't understand or know is that prior to her going into high school, girls could actually commit to a college scholarship, a verbal college scholarship in the 8th grade. And even before. And so I think it was in 16 or 17, they changed the rule. And so now you can't speak to a college coach until your September of your junior year. And so that changed the landscape completely, because there were girls that are younger than Gabby. So Gabby's a 20 graduate. And so there were girls, 22s and 21s and so forth that were offered in 6th, 7th, 8th grade because the Power 5 started seeing, hey, the playing field might be a little bit more leveled. So when we chose to go to the Sorcerers, or when Gabby chose to go to the Sorcerers, it was difficult. She had a lot of friends that she had that she got used to growing up with and playing with, and the commitment for her became, I have to be in front of the kind of pitching that I'm going to see as a hitter, because she's a position player. I have to see better pitching to show that I'm competitive enough. So a coach doesn't want to see me facing inferior pitching. And that's really, I think baseball and I think softball are totally dominated by pitching. So you have to be seeing good pitching you need to know your relevance in the sport. And so we went to a ton of camps. We went to a ton of camps that we paid for. I would not suggest it. And I'm not trying to beat anybody up or telling, everybody has their own path. But my personal advice as a father that spent a lot of money to make this happen, those camps where you pay for, you just don't get what you think you should get out of it. When you actually step on a college campus and you're being coached by the staff that you potentially want to play for, that's where you're going to actually get seen. That's where Gabby's opportunities started. And her opportunities were great. I mean, there were some phenomenal people recruited her. I mean, she had amazing offers, across the country. I mean, some of the most prestigious schools in the country recruited her. And they didn't play in the conference that was as competitive as at the level that she wanted to play at. She chose to play at the highest level she could potentially play at. Oregon was a top 10 school last year in softball before the season got shut down. She wanted the challenge. She chose to go to a school where she's not being given much. And for people that think that everybody that's in college playing a sport is on a full ride scholarship, you're being misinformed. I'm telling you right now, softball has less than 12 scholarships for the entire team every single year. The likelihood of one person getting a full ride it doesn't happen often. So, they combine financial aid, they combine academic scholarships, you combine grants, and they combine athletic money, and that's how some people get to full rides. So Gabby's not a full ride athlete. Gabby is a preferred walk-on she has some scholarship money, but she's not a preferred walk-on. She's got scholarship money, but it's not the largest scholarship on the team. She has to compete. She's chose to say, hey, I know who I am. I know what my abilities are, and I'm going to go get it. And as a father, you start to look and say, I think I've done the right thing. And not just because of softball, because if that's the only thing she knows right now is softball. The only thing her biggest love in outside of her family is softball. So for her to say, I don't want the easy route. I want the tough route. I want the route I'm going to go earn it. But she wants to play for a national championship. This is her best opportunity to play for a national championship.
Absolutely.
So, again, humbleness aside, she's not on her own here. We know a ton of girls that are just like Gabby that are doing the exact same things that have, she played with a girl on her team, Alyssa Orr, got a scholarship to the Big 12 school and was not being recruited prior to her being on that team either. But she did the same thing, goes to Denver, plays very, very well for a week, goes to nationals, hits a walk-off winner for us against one of the top teams in the nation. And in the celebration, she dislocates her kneecap.
Oh, goodness.
And so, but great for her. The school that actually offered her honored the scholarship.
Good.
And she's recovered, healthy. Kid runs like an antelope. I mean, she's so fast, and she lopes when she runs. It's amazing. Actually, she played softball and ran track last year and was just a phenomenal athlete both ways. So, we want to, these are the conversations we want to have because we want to inform. We want people to understand how recruiting works. Scott's been through this with both of his kids, and hopefully at one point we'll get at least one of them in, if not both of them in, if they're allowed to come in and speak. Once you go to college, you're not, I don't want to say you're property of the school, but you have to honor some restrictions and regulations within the school.
Yeah. There's certain media restrictions, and that we can make that a topic for another conversation, but thank you for that introspect of the father being part of the player. We got kind of a view from both sides of it, and it was really great to hear a lot of great information. But I kind of want to segue off of what you were just saying into some NCAA statistics that I think really make an example of how tough it is to get to where Gabby is now. So according to the NCAA, they compile research on statistics of athletes that compete at the high school level. They show how many make it to the NCAA level, and then in the professional sports, they've got more statistics for that. But since Gabby's here, I thought it would be kind of interesting to hit on softball. So according to the NCAA, as of April of 2020, their latest study, participating high school softball athletes, 362,038.
Holy moly.
362,038. Only 20,000 are going to play in college. And that when we drill that down a little bit further, that number in percentage-wise is 5.6%. So of all the softball players that are playing at the high school level, and I would imagine that number might even be higher when you look at, there's probably a large group of athletes that play strictly club and don't even play high school. So that number's probably maybe even
substantially higher.
Yeah, even higher. But they have it at 5.6. I with that said, I'm imagining it might even be closer to 4. It might even be a lower number. But when you look at high school percentage, the NCAA Division I, 1.8%. 1.8%, and Gabby's in that 1.8%. That's a phenomenal statistics. Division II, 1.7. Division III, 2.2%. So I guess the moral of the story is go back and listen to what Gabby went through to get where she's at. It took a lot of hard work. It took a lot of dedication both on her and her family to get her where she's at. It's not a fluke that she's where she's at. It's the culmination of a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, a lot of commitment to your craft. And so again, I don't want to embarrass you or make you feel uncomfortable, but again, thanks for being here, Gabby. We're really excited to see what the future holds for you. And with today's technology, a lot of us are going to get to watch you play on TV and live stream and all that. So we're looking forward to that. And hopefully, Coach Colsey, if you're listening to this, you'll schedule a series against Oregon like you have in the years past so that we can watch her play here in Stockton. So
yeah, and getting back to what you talked about with the numbers as far as the divisions, Division 1, 2, and 3, obviously that's NCAA, so they're not including NAIA. But, so let's just, and we'll kind of wrap this up pretty quickly, but so you go back 2 years for the Linden High School team. So Linden's a school of 620, say.
On a good day.
When the wind blows
who
right.
shows up.
When the wind blows right. And
if all the buses pick up all the kids, they might get to that.
So let's just say they're 620 and they have a softball team. So go back 2 years. The teams that Gabby's played on in the last 2 years, I think, my numbers are right, I think there's 7 girls playing collegiate softball from the NAIA level to Division I. Not inclusive of your daughter who plays Division I hockey, women's hockey. So that's 8. Really, because, anytime you leave, I don't care what sport it is, and get, all of our kids in Linden are lucky because they get to play 3 sports if you're into that.
Right.
And so my point to that conversation is that don't let the numbers dictate your future. Don't let the numbers dictate or challenge your dream. If your dream is to play at the collegiate level, you can find a home. You may not be a Division I player, but if you want to play and you want to work, you can find a place to play. And so there's plenty of opportunity out there. Don't sell yourself short. If you want it bad enough, you can go get it. And so with that being said, I truly appreciate, Gabby being here. I'm going to miss her. She leaves on Sunday, so it's going to be a rough one for us, but I'm proud of her. I think that, the future is bright for her. The opportunities are endless, and, I'm glad to be and lucky to be her father. So with that being said, again, you guys can reach us at 209 Prep Sports on Twitter and Facebook. Again, 209 Prep Sports on Twitter and Facebook. And you can reach us by email at prepsports209@yahoo.com. Again, prepsports209@yahoo.com.
We did get a couple of emails this week, and I thought I'd just as we close out, touch on them, and we can talk about them more later. But we got an email, I imagine, from somebody in the Ncaa area. It says, will you guys be covering our schools? Go Buffs. So I'm guessing Ncaa High School. But, yeah, absolutely. We plan on covering as much as we can. Our coverage will get better with the more information that we get from the listeners. Another one, you mentioned that you'll be covering all sports in our area. What are some of these other sports? I compete in rodeo. Can we get covered? Absolutely. We want to hear about you and your rodeo exploits, but we're going to cover whatever sports you guys want us to cover. It's not about what we want to cover. It's about what you want to cover and educate us. Rodeo is something that I know is a really big deal in Oakdale, but I think it's kind of spread around the San Joaquin, Stanislaus, Merced area quite a bit. So look forward to hearing from you guys on that.
A funny story, after we finished our podcast last week, I almost started having second thoughts. Like, I was like, what have we just got ourselves into? Like, we're almost committed on this weekly basis, and are we going to run out of content, and those types of things. And then, the rationalization and the cooler head prevailed of myself. And I started saying, God, there's so much to cover. Now, do we have enough? Is there enough time in a year for us to cover all the things we need to cover or want to cover? And I don't think it's a need, but, this whole COVID situation that we're in, a lot of people say it's just football, or it's just baseball, or it's just volleyball, or it's not just that. This is many kids' second families, maybe their first family. This is the competitiveness that we have, the growth that we have together, the workouts. I think there's more. I think our team bonding happened more with workouts last year in our sports than they ever did with anything else that we did. When you're in there, blood, sweat, and tears getting after it, and you look to your left and you look to your right, and the guy's doing just as much work as you, or the person's doing just as much work as you, that's when you know that you're in it. You're in it to win it, and you guys are a family. So hopefully we can get, our sports back and active, and, our kids can return to things that make them happy, and try to have some type of normalcy in their lives, and hopefully it happens sooner rather than later. So again, thanks, Gab. Appreciate you guys, Scott. And just so everybody knows, we're not doing this alone. We have our expert engineer in the back room is Jake Peters. Jake has really worked his butt off to make sure we put this studio together and we get good sound quality. As you can see, we shouldn't be as hollow as we've been in the last couple of weeks. And it's taken a lot of work. Jake's done a great job, and super appreciate him. So with that being said, everybody, we're going to sign off. Again, you can reach us at 209 Prep Sports on Facebook and Twitter. And you can reach us at prepsports209 at yahoo.com. Thanks, everybody.